Do you need to take a break? Is the call of the wild ringing in your ears? Are you looking for a chance to escape to scenic views and comfy cottages for the weekend? Then come on over to Camp 98.7. Our woods are blasted with freezing winds and deadly radiation. Our toxic lake is frozen solid. There are plenty of bodies to be found beneath the floorboards, and no doubt you are just simply dying to play with our resident ghosts. If you want to relax or have a romantic movie night, then don't worry. We have an entire channel dedicated to eerie sounds and snow. Just pay no heed to the mad ravings of lunatics carved in your bedroom. And finally, we are secluded enough that no one will hear you scream. Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm so ready to go camping. Hi there everyone, Lars here with my review and analysis for Murder Drones Episode 4, Cabin Fever.
I got the madness. I got cabin fever! I've got it too!
Brought to you by Camille's Harem, not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers, because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. Now, for this video, I want to have a look at the events within the episode, and then do some theory crafting, and finally see what kinds of writing advice we can pull out of it. So, without any further ado, let's dive into Cabin Fever.
We got cabin fever, we're all going mad.
Again, I have to say that I am impressed with how Liam bucks so many expectations. I know a lot of people were expecting a showdown with Tessa already, and for myself, I thought that we might get some insane excursion deeper into the city and discover more eldritch abominations. Instead, Liam takes us camping, and that makes the Goosebumps look like preschool when he's done with it. And what really shocked me is that we already got Khan divulging the secrets from Nori's kooky crazy stuff this early on in the series. It turns out that Khan ran into Nori right after the core's collapse and subsequent nuclear explosion. Their parties were trying to figure out what was going on and what to do, and Khan fell for Nori instantly, and they got married. Aww. Following the picture that shows where they met, Camp 98.7, Uzi uses her teacher's apathy and dry contempt for his students to organize a camping trip as punishment for the whole class. This way, Uzi can make it to the camp for some reconnaissance. Accompanying the teenage drones are N and V, who act as camp counselors. I cannot see this going wrong in any way.
That's everyone! -1?
Man, I wish I could have gotten away with this as a teacher. Just a quick tangent. I wanted to take my students to an open shaft mine up in the mountains with a 150-foot drop. I mean, nothing could have gone wrong.
So, missing some campers here.
N and V organize the campers, and with help from Thad and Lizzie, they get the festivities underway with water sports, archery, and other fun activities. This gives Uzi the cover she needs to go and poke around for clues. And in another instance of incredible development, Uzi is already using her powers very adeptly. With the Absolute Solver's godlike might and energy and all the things it can do, she uncovers a worker drone buried beneath the floorboards and littered with scrawlings similar to those of Uzi's mother's. She also finds a little bug drone that begins communicating with her, recognizing her as probably her mother. However, there is something else stalking Uzi. A ghostly apparition exposes itself for a brief moment, and there's a dismembered hand roaming around too. But I'll get to that when it comes time to theory craft. For now, Absolute Solver is coming pretty easily to Uzi, but it does come at a cost. She's overheating. In order to cool down, she needs to consume some oil, and she resorts to using one of the corpses from Doll's apartment to drink some of that sweet, warm oil. That's when V arrives and threatens to kill Uzi if she goes down that route. V also reveals that she and N agreed to come on this camping trip because they're hunting for Doll, who has been shadowing Uzi's movements. In this scene, we see that Uzi's healing powers activate naturally, so Absolute Solver is taking control, which is dangerous for later. When Uzi goes to tell N what she's all found out, she comes across her fellow classmates practicing their archery, and it does my heart good to see them practicing excellent safety on the archery range. When an arrow comes her way, she reflexively uses Absolute Solver. She not only liquefies the arrow, but creates what appears to be a fleshy monstrosity from the primordial goop that has resulted from this action. V recognizes what this is and gets ready to kill Uzi, and stops her, but Uzi hightails it into the woods, fearful of what has just happened. Absolute Solver begins taking control, and when Uzi barricades herself inside an abandoned cottage, she begins wigging out. The light and sounds of a clock are just too much for her. She uses Absolute Solver again to destroy these distractions, but her powers go out of control, and she changes, becoming the same beast that her mother and co-workers saw in their nightmares. N goes to check on Uzi, but gets lost, and he discovers a lab that is surprisingly, shockingly on, and a conspicuously placed VHS about zombie drones. The moment N touches it, he has this crazy vision of himself, warped and hungry, a dismembered hand hanging in a chandelier, and the mansion from episode 2 under a horrifying anomaly in the sky. And another creepy hand scuttles away in the dark before N takes the VHS. Meanwhile, V has left the campers to their own devices. Rebecca and Darren leave to go make out and find Uzi's cabin. They then do the dumb teenager thing and try to get into it. And after teaching teens for 4 years, I can confirm that 50% of them would absolutely do this.
Get it now!
The two drones are attacked by Eldritch Gargoyle Uzi, who then follows the mortally wounded Rebecca back to the campfire where the others are roasting s'mores and telling scary stories. Last Girl, however, didn't read her book thoroughly enough and tells everyone to split up. Eldritch Uzi then picks them off one by one until V arrives and stops Uzi from murdering Lizzie, and she addresses Uzi differently, saying,
"New body, same horrors. Huh, Sin?"
Eldritch Uzi, however, gets the better of V and nearly kills her until N shows up and easily chucks her up into the stratosphere. This boy's been eating Wheaties with his oil. N flies up and speaks calmly to Uzi. The madness has momentarily fled her and she fears that N is going to leave her because of the monster she is turning into. N assures her that he won't and that they'll work out everything together. But as they return home, it is clear that Uzi's transformation is far more permanent as she is now harmed by sunlight. And we get a closing shot of the VHS at N's side. And, well, there we have it. I left out the shipping teases that we got throughout this episode. If you want to delve into that hilarious online battle, let me know. I kind of want to do it anyway, but peer pressure is a fantastic motivator. But seriously, this episode covered a ton of different ground and really marched to a far different tune than I was expecting. We didn't get Friday the 13th, or Jeepers Creepers, or The Ritual, or even the Blair Witch Project. Instead, Liam delivered a story that was more of a crossover between The Evil Dead and a nuclear zombie flick. And really, that's what works best for this overall show. Just like with The Promining, Liam is showing that he understands his horror stories, but he's adding a unique twist to them to make the tired tropes feel fresh and engaging. Now, I'll get to more of that in a bit when I talk about the writing advice generated by this episode. But let's shift gears for now and plow ahead into theory crafting. In my video on Absolute Solver, I laid out everything the program allows the drones to do and the horrifying toll it takes on them. And largely, this episode confirmed much of what I said in that theory. Huzzah! I love it when I win. If you want a full breakdown of what Absolute Solver is, please check out that video. So, in exchange for telekinetic reality warping powers, we not only have confirmation that the drone using the program is made into an oil-drinking monster, but the further a drone such as Uzi taps into the potential inherent in Absolute Solver, the program transforms them into a Lovecraftian horror. Holo Spooky Snake Crab Jay now makes a whole lot more sense. Let me explain why I think that tapping deeper into Absolute Solver is what transformed Uzi. Because, you see, Doll used her powers extensively and for far longer than Uzi, but she wasn't transformed into an abomination gargoyle. Uzi was becoming a cannibal the more she used Absolute Solver, and we saw that, but it was only when she was forced to make the arrow into primordial soup and thereby created some horrifying form of life that the creepy, goopy, oily, bloody pupae process began overtaking her. And since Dahl never went this far as we have seen in the series, we can then theorize that there is a threshold one must pass in order to be fully transformed. What this also means is that Absolute Solver does have the means to manipulate biological matter, which was something I speculated the program might not be able to do, so that makes this even way more horrifying than I previously thought. However, everything is different now, because Uzi could create fleshy matter. This probably means that the sticky stuff we saw covering Eldritch J's heart was created using Absolute Solver. And by making a drone into a pseudo-cyborg, the robot gains even greater power. Uzi was wiping the floor with V, who has been said to have the biggest kill count amongst all the murder drones. No wonder J.C. Jensen, in space, wants to wipe out the drones. Absolute Solver is all kinds of dangerous. This episode also gives us more information on the Puppet Master, and what we saw flash across N's screen when he was rebooted back in episode 1. Twitter user Delcy Dragon compiled the evidence to show that Sin, the entity that V addresses in the woods, is an administrator. Sin has the power to block or access Absolute Solver. Sin was also very likely responsible behind what happened with Eldritch J.
New body, same horrors. Huh, Sin?
That could mean that Sin is the Puppet Master, or at least directly connected to the Puppet Master. Now, who is Sin? Sin is probably the drone we saw with Tessa at the beginning of episode 2. My evidence for this is that the ghost drone Uzi sees in the abandoned cabin closely resembles the drone standing shyly behind Tessa. It's curious that we also see this ghostly version of her just before Uzi is transformed and V starts referring to her as Sin. This implies a direct connection. So right now, I'm saying that Sin is the new drone that Tessa introduced in N's flashback. What makes this revelation particularly curious is that Sin seems very interested in N. When Eldritch Uzi asks to speak to N, that plea makes very little sense for Uzi to say, because even when under duress, Uzi is usually very snarky and snappy towards V, and clearly N isn't present. V replies that she won't let her speak to N, which prompts Eldritch Uzi to snap and nearly murder V. The fact of the matter is that V isn't addressing Uzi at this moment, but was clearly speaking to Sin. And as a side note, this explains why V has been referring to Uzi as a thing. Ever since seeing Absolute Solver in action, V has been treating Uzi as a potential puppet for Sin. But getting back to it, I'm having a very strong impression that Sin really wants to make contact with N, which makes blocking Absolute Solver in him an interesting choice on Sin's part. Wouldn't using the program on N be helpful in reconnecting, especially if Absolute Solver gives Sin the chance to possess her victims? Maybe it's because of the toll that Absolute Solver takes on the drone, that maybe Sin doesn't want to use it on N. This would probably be because of the relationship N once had with Sin, that has been erased from his memory. And that is why the VHS was left out for N to find. Sin is trying to awaken N's memories, and thereby reconnect with him. V is working hard to prevent N from recovering those memories or having any interactions with Sin to protect him from whatever happened in their past. Why? Because whatever happened was truly, deeply traumatic. If the severed hand in the chandelier and the black hole thing floating above their old manor is anything to go by. My theory is that the drones in the past used Absolute Solver to do something awful. They probably killed their old masters, with Tessa being one of the few survivors, if not the sole survivor. Sin wants to reunite with N and use Absolute Solver to potentially wipe out humanity and enjoy her freedom with N. And to do just that, she's using the drones who accessed Absolute Solver and is trying to possess their bodies. At the same time, the disassembly drones were specifically sent to wipe out all the drones who might have the Absolute Solver program. J.C. Jensen is unsure of which drones have it, and I speculated earlier that all the drones could have the program somewhere within their code, and I stand by that claim. But whatever was discovered at Camp 98.7 did something to the worker drones there and activated Absolute Solver within them. Every drone who worked there was plagued by nightmares of a monster that could come out of the program, and they mingled them with other drones, blending in with them and getting lost in the crowd. So that's probably why J.C. Jensen is just murdering all of them. It is also curious to note that in the background of the cabins, on the whiteboards, there's evidence that the camp was also near the site that might have set off the core's collapse, which could support my other theory that a worker drone that had fallen victim to Absolute Solver was responsible for Copper 9's demise. If this is correct, that would also support another part of my previous theory that J.C. Jensen is trying to fix their overall problem by using the drones that potentially started it. If this is correct, that would also support another part of my previous theory that J.C. Jensen is trying to fix the overall problem by using the drones that potentially started it all, fixing their mistake in the same way that they made it. They engineered the disassembly drones to go and wipe out the worker drones and die once the job was done. This would explain why N's memories were wiped and why V, who appears to have some of her memories intact, had her personality twisted into that of a murderer's. The disassembly drones will one way or another, therefore, destroy humanity's greatest enemy in Absolute Solver. But N's compassion and friendliness is putting all of that at risk. By stepping in to save Uzi, she will continue to be changed by Absolute Solver. Her form is becoming that of a disassembly drone's, which in and of itself is a delightful mystery, because honestly, I can't tell if it's the company's own cruel joke to make the disassembly drones look like the monsters that haunted Nori's dreams, or if by using Absolute Solver to create the murder drones, they naturally took on that form. But in any case, Uzi will continue to be haunted by Absolute Solver, and we'll see if the power of friendship by the end of the series can overcome this great evil. There's a ton more theorizing and speculating to do, but to avoid an hour-long video, I'll end it there. And I hear some of you laughing in the background behind your screens who have watched my longer form videos because, yeah, those went on for a while, but I am keeping my promise this time. So let's wrap up by talking about the writing advice that we can glean from this episode, Cabin Fever.
I've got cabin fever. I think I lost my grip.
I'd like to get my hands on whoever wrote this script.
One of the first things I will say is this, that if you want to have fun with the tropes and expectations embedded in any genre, like horror for instance, you need to understand that genre. You'll have to do some research and really dive into the stories that popularized and codified that style of storytelling. If you don't, you're probably not being as fresh or original as you think. Liam Vickers is an obvious fan of horror. His earlier works have already explored body horror, the monster within, narratives that misdirect the audience, and so forth. All of these things are going into murder drones, but cranked up to 11. Liam has also demonstrated his understanding of the different subgenres within horror. From episode to episode, Murder Drones has adopted elements of the alien invasion back in episode 1, cosmic horror in episode 2, teenage possession and dark powers in episode 3, and now the teen slasher in episode 4. However, these episodes are not standalone homages to classic horror stories. Liam takes inspiration from them and uses their tropes where necessary to complement Murder Drone's central plot and characters. And by understanding the genre, he also knows how to flip the tropes when and where necessary, such as making the murderous teen at the prom the secret heroine trying to save everyone, or the monster who actually ends up saving the girl from herself. And at this time, the power of a loving friendship, not outright romance, is the thing that saves the heroes and redeems the monster. There's actually an entire college-level course based around that one trope from horror, which is why pressuring me to do a video on the shipping in Murder Drones is definitely worth it, and you should subscribe for when that video comes out. The ultimate takeaway is that you need to understand the genre you're writing for in order to make the most of your own story within that genre. Another thing we should take note of is the visual cues. Even in a book without pictures, you can still give plenty of them. And I bring this up because Uzi's backpack at the beginning of the episode was a subtle hint at the kind of monster she was going to become. And all of the images scrawled by the insane worker drones from Camp 98.7 also served as clues for the monster Uzi will transform into by the end of the episode, as well as to give us some hints and insights into the origins of the disassembly drones. Liam and Studio Glitch make full use of their visual storytelling medium to give us all kinds of spooky details regarding Absolute Solver, sin, and what's happening to the main characters. Unless you're going to be making a show, a movie, or a comic series, it's hard to utilize this method of storytelling in a book without including some kind of illustrations. If you can add pictures within your books and stories, I personally highly recommend it. It's a fun way to create another link of interaction between the audience and your story. But even if you don't have illustrations, you can add the same details that are on screen in a prose form. For instance, if you're writing a book from N's perspective and you want to include the creepy hand following him around, you can't just simply zoom your reader's imaginary camera back and show them the hand, not without breaking a crucial level of immersion. Instead, you can write something like this. As N approached the buzzing computers, the soft sound of snow emanated from the ancient screen. He faintly heard another sound that had been stalking him ever since entering the cabin. Soft thumping, like when Uzi grew bored and drummed her fingers on the table. But it was so dark, and with all the other ambient noises, N couldn't figure out where it was coming from. A distant insect scuttled away as he approached the desk, and then something very, very curious caught his eye. A VHS. By getting creative with your words, you can easily create the same scenario and clues as visual media can. The inherent strength in film and television is that way more info can be packed onto the screen without eating up a ton of time, like when you're trying to explain everything in a book. The more you want to add in a book, the more creative and sparing you'll have to get with your words. Lastly, a great mystery is made by constantly adding details. You want to give your audience enough information that they aren't completely lost and can form solid assumptions and theories for what is happening. You then add more details, crucial information that they don't have, and then change the trajectory of their thinking. It also requires that your characters act differently to the same information. For example, Uzi keeps poking and prodding deeper into these mysteries and is losing her identity and sanity in the process, while N is finding a friend and becoming more confident and an overall happier individual. And V is pursuing a personal agenda that is way different from her program to kill all the worker drones. 3 different reactions here, and 3 different character arcs to the same information. This pulls the audience in all kinds of directions, trying to puzzle out what the truth really is. And pulling that off is way more difficult than you might think. Liam is really doing a top-notch job with his story. Before I sign off, I just want to give a shout out to some of the great jokes and nods in this episode. First of all, the Goosebumps aesthetic to the campsite, that was perfect. It was like something right off of the pages, right off of the front cover of one of those books. The 2 teens going off to make out and how their actions are outright called immoral, and they get killed, that was pretty good. I mean, in Murder Drones, everyone is susceptible to dying unless you have hardy plot armor or regeneration. But if you, dear viewer, ever find yourself in a horror story, remember this.
Certain rules that one must abide by in order to successfully survive a horror movie. Number 1, you can never have sex. Sex equals death, okay?
Uzi, maybe you want to keep the hand-holding in check if you want to make it to the finale. That's a good girl. I also love how we get the whole campfire story that makes fun of the hook. And then we have the drone who is getting high on a magnet while out in the woods. That was great. And then the workers who are just so used to death by now that they're just accepting V murdering people right in front of them. V and Lizzie have an excellent bad girl friendship going on here, which I really appreciate. And finally, I love that Liam made a reference to Cliffside, with Uzi and N plummeting to their deaths while having an emotional conversation. And I just love the accents that were put to the weird beaked thing tail. That was great. Like I said, there is so much to talk about with this one episode alone. Murder Drones is so flipping fantastic. I'm really looking forward to the 5th episode. And while we wait for it to premiere and for Uzi to lose even more of her marbles, we'll have plenty of great videos to release and to dive even deeper into good storytelling and writing. And if you're a novice author looking for more writing advice, please check out our podcast, Camille's Harem. And if you'd like to support us, please like, comment, subscribe, share, but even better, check out the books we've published. Links for all of that and more are in the description below. Thank you for joining us on this terrifying nuclear winter we call writing, and until the next video, y'all, tschüss.
Cabin fever! are we doing?
What's going on?
What was that? I feel like such a fool. Yeah, me too.
Just avoid another whole spire. Baby steps. Together?